seek the narrow road, because the broad road only leads to destruction. And there's two verses, and they were the two verses that converted me on the night that Billy Graham preached on them. My name is Ethel Joycelyn Murphy. I was born in Newcastle Street in Perth. You know, I was a horrible little kid. I grizzled all the time. And my mum never got me up out of bed until all the men had had breakfast and gone out to work, and then she'd concentrate on getting me up. And she had a little table, I don't know where it came from or how she got it, and a little chair. And she put those in the centre of the kitchen, and I had to sit there and eat my breakfast. And whatever she gave me was never right. I didn't want it. I wanted something else every day. I lived in a happy home. Mum and Dad were a happy married couple. I loved my brothers. And everything was simple, you know, very simple. We used to play games after tea at night when there wasn't any homework to be done, and everybody was happy. But everything was simple, you know. Nothing was sort of involved, and you loved all your neighbours, and you went to things in an old horse and cart, and everybody was on the same footing, and it was just, life was happy. Well, the saddest time is something I don't talk about at all anymore. I think about it a lot, but I have never told anybody about it. It was just within my family. I was an only daughter after two boys, and I was the apple of my father's eye, and it all just went wrong. And I spent many years not knowing, and I still don't know what happened, but the other person concerned, before she died, asked me could I ever forgive her for what she did to me. And I said I'd already forgiven her. That would have been the many years in between those times were my saddest time. In those days, parents kept their daughters at home after they'd finished school. Hardly any of my girlfriends went out to work. They just lived at home, helped their mum. With me, my life was my music, my singing, my acting, because I was taking lessons from a chap who came out from England, an actor. We played tennis a lot. and just helping my mum. Well, that is my photo with my mum, who in those days, even 50 was considered fairly old, and she passed away when she was 55, and that was a photo we had taken together. I was about 16. I had a grandma and a grandpa. And I used to go and stay with them in Shenton Park on school holidays a lot. And by today's standards, they weren't terribly old, about 80, but they looked 180. You know, they dressed in black and they never went out, and they were old. That was my mother's parents, and her father used to come and stay with us in Lower Chittering, usually just after Christmas. And in those days you bought Christmas stockings, and they always had little white lollies in the toes. And one of my brothers and I, we used to put Aspros in them, in this pile of lollies, and we'd put them in a dish and we'd hand them around to, we called him Danan. And Danan never took them, he always took a lolly. But we found out afterwards that he was awake up to what we were doing. One of the things I remember came from my father. The mail arrived, which we only got 3 days a week, and I got a letter. And when my father finished reading his mail, he said, "Oh, who was your letter from, Joe?" And I must have been, I don't know whether I was dating Keith I probably was. And I said, "Oh, just a boy that I met that I meet at one of the dances we go to." "Oh," he wanted to know all about him. And I said, "I don't know anything about him." I said, "All I like is that we dance well together." And he said, "Do you know what happens to people who try to sit on 2 stools at once?" And I said, "No." He said, "They finish up on the floor." And I said, "Well, it doesn't even apply to me, because I'm not going out with him. I didn't even expect a letter from him." Well, he was doing an apprenticeship with his uncle at Bullsbrook, which was the nearest little sort of settlement town to us. I just thought he was a nice boy. At the beginning of the war, of course, I lived at home, and we were just dating. Then we became engaged in 1941, and that was quite funny, because we went to Perth. I didn't know that Keith had spoken to my dad about being engaged and all that. I didn't know that. But anyhow, we went to Perth to buy the ring, and we were going to a dance at night. On the Saturday night, was the Saturday morning we bought the ring. And of course I was all keyed up, thinking, "Oh, everybody's going to notice my ring," you see, with my hand around his shoulder. It got to the very last dance of the night and nobody had even noticed it. And then one lady who was, we were quite friendly with, but a middle-aged lady, the music stopped and they were standing next to us and she saw the ring. Oh, so it was gorgeous then, but it had been disappointing all night that no one had noticed it. We were married in 1942. We'd had the date 3 times and this leave had been cancelled every time. And the 4th time he went to the CO and said that this was a 4th time he tried to come down to Perth and get married, and it'd been cancelled, and it was, a bit poor that, everybody in that was invited had to be let know at the last minute that the wedding was off. And anyway, the CO said, well, if you can find a car going to Perth this weekend, you can go. And so that's what happened. They travelled all night, and we finally got married. When my first baby that lived was born, I had already lost a full-time baby at birth. I'd lost one halfway through, and then I had the daughter. And when I came to afterwards and asked them, was my baby all right? She said, of course she's all right. And that was the most wonderful words I'd heard. No, it's in a worse place. Gets worse every year. It is going to get worse because, of course, I believe in the Bible, and I think that there's other things that will happen before it gets better. Well, I think there again it's just being unselfish and thinking of others and putting others before yourself. And a lot of young people today, I often wonder if they've ever heard the word unselfish, because they just think of themselves and they don't worry about what they're doing, that it's causing grief to so many people. And I think if they thought more about other people, the world would be a better place. So many things give me joy. I think meeting up with old friends and people I've known for 90 years, and it doesn't seem possible that they've been my friends for all that time. Yeah, I think it would all come back to being with friends.